It was in the second chapter of Berserk proper that we first met one of Guts' strongest adversaries, and 370 plus chapters later, that assessment of their dynamic still stands. There are many strong characters in Berserk, but only a few can lay claim to the title of the strongest, and this man is one of them. Known as the battlefield god by every mercenary of this generation, Nosferatu's Zodd is as enigmatic as he is battle-hungry. For 300 years, Zodd has ravaged theaters of war the world over, and because he always comes out alive, he's gained the moniker of the Immortal One. And while most apostles aren't immortal in the series, in Zodd's case, it just might be true. Because if there's one thing that cannot be denied about Griffith's current right-hand man, it's that he's the definition of absolute strength, or at least as close as one can be to such a thing. And a lot of that is owed to his inhuman anatomy, so in this video, we're going to be exploring just that. How does Zodd's past influence his current existence? If you guys have seen our video on how apostles are made, and you really should if you haven't, then you'll know that the past life of any demonic being in Berserk really influences their current existence. Who you were yesterday is a huge part of who you are today and who you'll be tomorrow, so it only makes sense that it would be the same for apostles, who are essentially a crystallization of the worst aspects of that particular human being. Most apostles are created out of a desperate, baser sense of survival and deliverance from their sufferings. People like the Snake Baron and Wild exchanged their souls for power so that they could get the strength they needed to realize their most depraved desires. Characters like the Slug Count and Rosine became apostles because they wanted to end the pain their families were causing them. The Egg of the Perfect World became an apostle because he wanted to create a world where no one would have to be treated like him. The Slug Count's desire to escape his wife's pagan infidelity, Rosine's desire to escape her familial situation, and the Egg's desire to escape the world itself made them more unique than other apostles, as they had powers others did not possess. All three of them could create pseudo-apostles, for example. And then there's the elite warrior class of apostles, people who transcended their humanity because they were chasing something much bigger than themselves. It could be an ideal, like Locus's hunt for the perfect king, or Grunbeld's search for the most worthy death. Or it could be an obsession, like Irvine's apparent desire for the ultimate hunt, and Zodd's evident desire to fight the person that's the absolute definition of strength. In all of these cases, an apostle's past influenced their future, so it's not a stretch to imagine the same is true for Zodd. Locus and Grunbeld were renowned warriors who became obsessed with a warrior's ideal, and ended up becoming soldiers for Griffith's war demon army. The same is most likely true for Zodd, but in a more, shall we say, primordial fashion. When you look at the Immortal One's obsession with fighting battles and his battle skills and adaptability, it's hard not to think that he was a ruthless warrior, even as a human being. When Zodd's not rocking his birthday suit or his apostle form, you'll see him decked out in what can only be described as primal gear. He has the furs and leathers for armor instead of steel-plated protection. He prefers fighting with a massive cleaver, but can adapt to use any sort of blade on the fly. Rapiers, sabers, you name it. You will also have noticed that many of his design motifs kind of align with the Kushan Empire's symbolism. This is something we will address in another video. But the point is, Zodd was clearly an Eastern warrior that was so obsessed with fighting stronger and stronger opponents that he one day accepted a deal with the devil to continue the fight as an apostle. Now that we have the reason for Zodd becoming an apostle out of the way, let's look into what happened when he became one. What happened to Zodd when he became an apostle? Why is he the ultimate chimera? When a human being becomes a thrall of the Demon Kings, their existential form itself changes. That is exactly what happened to Zodd as well, when he went from being a barbaric human warrior to a barbaric demon warrior without peer. When a person activates their Behelit at the moment of their deaths, a fissure opens up in their hearts that links them to the astral world. Should they accept the God-Hand's offer of a greater power in exchange for servitude, the power of evil will surge through that fissure and transform that human being into an apostle. Who Zodd sacrificed to become an apostle isn't something we're aware of. Neither do we want to dig into it too much because we don't want to die a premature death. But what is important to note here is that Zodd's determination got him a power level that was well beyond that of a regular apostle. Most apostles, when they're reborn, are granted a form that best reflects their goals and desires. Wild becoming a giant ape because of his primal addiction to sex and death makes as much sense as Rosine becoming a quasi elf because she always wanted to be one. Locus is a steel-plated centaur, and Grunbeld is a fire-breathing dragon. But Zodd looks like the definition of the word chimera, and that probably has a lot to do with what motivated him to become an apostle. To beat the strongest in the world, you can't spend all your apostle focus points in one skill area, so to speak. You need range. You need to be able to fight with all types of opponents on all kinds of terrain. And from that perspective, Zodd has the perfect apostle body. He is monstrously strong even in his base human form. He's about twice Guts' size, and all of it is pure muscle and sinew. You'd think that this would hinder his speed, but you would be lucky if you could even keep up with his movements. He's that quick and agile. His natural skin is so thick that regular swords can't cut through it. In his introductory scene, we saw Zodd standing in front of a mound of corpses, all former Falcons, with not a scratch on his body. In fact, the only time we see him take damage is from blades that are extremely refined, like Griffith's saber, or extremely heavy, like Guts' first longsword or Dragon Slayer. Now, usually, Zodd's base form is enough to take care of every human threat in front of him. In fact, he only transformed when Guts managed to push him to actually try and block an attack. But once he transforms, even seasoned apostles can't stand up to him. Zodd has the most unique apostle form in the entire series in that he actually looks like a monstrous chimera. A chimera in Greek mythology usually refers to a monster with the physical attributes of many incongruous animal species. The most notable one is described in Homer's Iliad via the story of the Greek hero Bellerophon, where the chimera appears as a monster with the fore of a lion, the hinder of a serpent, and a goat's head jutting out from the middle. This chimera was said to be able to breathe fire as well, and terrorized Lycia until Bellerophon slew it with the help of Pegasus. These days, a chimera is used as a descriptive term for any monstrous being that has body parts from different animals. Just look at Hunter x Hunter for an anime-related example. And this is the metric that we're applying to Zodd's categorization. The Immortal one has the body parts of several strong predators meshed into his being to create the perfect killing machine. For starters, his body frame resembles a massive silverback gorilla that you've made the mistake of pissing off at all times. His arms are disproportionately long when you take a look at him from a human's perspective, but it makes perfect sense when you look at things from our lens. Zodd might not walk on all fours, but his long arms give him a considerable reach advantage over his enemies, which he is more than happy to exploit. And while his body is built like a silverback's, he's even more dangerous than the world's most dangerous ape because his actual physical appearance is modeled after a lion's. Zodd's entire body is covered with thick black fur, and it's a damn shame that he doesn't have a majestic mane surrounding his menacing lion's head. Instead of palms, he's got paws, which he can use to maul fully armored knights in half. When Zodd has to charge at an enemy, his paws help him generate more speed, and you can imagine pretty clearly what happens to anything that gets caught in a lion's jaw. He would be menacing enough if that were the extent of his abilities, but that's just the beginning. Where the front of Zodd's body looks like a lion's, the back end of his body looks like a satyr's. He's got hooved hinds that, when he's bipedal, make him tower over his enemies, and turn him into one of those cars from Death Race when he's on all fours. He's also got a lengthy tail which he can use as a whip to smack about his opponents, and if you're unlucky enough to get anywhere near his head, he will instantly skewer you with his sharp and nigh unbreakable bull's horns. You can see why we called Zodd a chimera now, can't you? He's designed after a lion, his tail is like a sentient snake, and he's got satyr legs, and satyrs are usually equated with goats in Greek mythology. This already gives him an advantage over his targets on land, hills, and even in the water. Don't believe us on that second bit? Go watch a mountain goat climb a slope and you'll see why we say that. His tail makes his offense that much more versatile, and the less we speak of the usefulness of horns in a predator's arsenal, the better. But all of this hasn't even taken into account Zodd's greatest strength. And no, we're not talking about his raw power. The Immortal one can, when required, spawn wings and take flight. Yup, we're not joking. Now imagine a murder gorilla flying at you at top speed, with perfect control over its own body, disregarding all laws of physics. That is why we call Zodd the ultimate chimera of Berserk. He can fight enemies on any terrain at or above sea level, and with his god hand gifted powers, tear them apart limb from limb. The fact that he has the ideal body to face any and all comers is a big reason why Zodd has lived for 3 centuries. How do you kill something that's prepared to kill you in a million different ways and has the answer to all of your strategies? Turns out you can't. Perhaps that's the reason why Zodd is considered to be one of, if not the strongest apostle in Berserk. Speaking of which, Is Zodd the strongest apostle warrior in Griffith's war demon army? Why is he called the Immortal One? We knew Zodd was going to be one of the strongest characters in Berserk as a whole from the moment he was introduced. We don't just say this because he casually whooped Guts and Griffith's asses and then punched a hole through a castle's ceiling to fly off into the night sky, although that was part of it. No, we say this because of the long life he's managed to live as an apostle, and more importantly, as an adversary of Skull Knight. Zodd is by far the oldest apostle in the series. For 3 centuries, he's roamed this earth, searching for battle and blood, and none have managed to satisfy his hunger. You can tell from his first fight with Guts that he was shocked a human possessed such potential, and his regret at having to cut short his fun was palpable. Zodd has never met a creature, man or apostle, that can match up to his might, and he sent many of his supposed brethren straight to the abyss himself. He's so powerful that he decided to let Guts live just to see his progress, and had nearly forgotten about him as an adversary until he really thought about it. And this is where Skull Knight becomes relevant. The foe of the Inhumans is arguably the greatest apostle killer in history. He's been in the game for way longer than Guts has, and just by looking at his Eclipse entrance, you can tell how many apostle graveyards this guy alone could have filled. We're sure that in the course of his 1,000-year crusade, he doesn't even remember the names of the apostles he's killed. He probably never even bothered to find that out, except, of course, in the case of Zodd. The Immortal One was born prior to the eclipse that happened before Griffith's. He's been around long enough to see 2 God Hand members come into the world, and countless of his apostle kin go into the vortex of souls. Zodd's loyalty is to his quest of strength, and the God Hand only, so he doesn't really care how many apostles die around him, but what he does care about is the man that usually does the killing, Skull Knight. Zodd openly admits that Skull Knight is the only person that matches his description of an opponent that personifies absolute strength, no matter how begrudgingly he expresses that sentiment. The pair has clashed numerous times over the course of Zodd's life, and the fact that both of them are still alive speaks volumes of their respective strengths. Apostles are extremely durable sons of guns. They're hard to beat up and near impossible to kill. Only things like direct cannon fire and a massive monster killer like Dragon Slayer can even hope to create a fatal opening, and even then it's a tall task to finish the job. When Guts fought the Slug Count, we saw that some apostles can regenerate lost limbs stronger and better, and his entire fight with Wild was a testament to the cockroach-like tenacity of an apostle's lifespan. They'll squeeze out every drop of power from their evil existence and then some to see through their desires, but that doesn't mean you can't kill them. Guts proved that in the very first chapter of Berserk, where he just absolutely wrecked the Snake Baron, but not after sustaining critical damage himself. And he's a man that's been fighting apostles for years and knows everything there is to know about them. Regular humans would be dead in a second if they tried to fight apostles like him, and yet, in front of Skull Knight's blade, they might as well be made of butter. Regular apostles stand no chance in front of him, to the point that his mere presence was enough to startle the apostles raiding Rickert's reserve unit, and one warning from him made them flee the scene. He also cut open a path for himself during the eclipse by not just cracking open the interstice, but carving through any apostle that stood in his way, of which there were several. The only one he couldn't quite kill was the Immortal One, and this is where the question of Zodd's immortality comes in. Like we mentioned a moment ago, apostles are extremely durable, but they can be killed. It takes a lot of effort to do it, but they can be killed. Every other apostle we've met in this series was likely created within the last 2 to 4 decades of the current timeline, and everyone we've seen get killed with our eyes so far most certainly was. But Zodd has lived for an unnaturally long period of time. He's such an enigma that even guys like Locus and Grunbeld, considered to be living legends by their people, know nothing of him. And for as easy as he makes apostle killing seem, Skull Knight sure can't get the job done against Zodd. It's like he just won't die until he fights the personification of absolute strength, and a large contributor to this could be the fact that Zodd is nearly immortal, the key word here being nearly. It's not that Zodd's unkillable, it's that he has an insanely high durability rate even amongst apostles. Zodd was able to withstand being struck by Emperor Ganishka's lightning not once, but twice. Why is this impressive? Well, Ganishka's lightning literally cooked most of his aerial assault unit to death. The Demon Emperor's sorcerous powers were so mighty that he took out dozens of apostles with one lightning strike. And Zodd was able to not only come out relatively unharmed, but the Mad Lad also flew straight through the locus of Ganishka's powers with Guts in tow. Both of them came out of it looking like they just got a city block's worth of power smashed through them, but both survived and decided to settle their score another day. And we haven't even even spoken about his regeneration factor, which potentially rivals Wolverine's. We've seen Zodd not just survive, but instantly heal a sword thrust downward through his shoulder into his ribcage. He's had his arms cut off numerous times, most notably by Griffith and Skull Knight, but he can simply reattach it to the stump, and within seconds, it's as if nothing happened. It looks like when the God Hand put this chimera together, they swapped out its flames for an insane healing rate. And it ended up working out, because Zodd knows his way around a kill unlike anyone else. This is what makes him the strongest soldier in Griffith's army, greater even than Locus and Grunbeld. For all his lancing skills and absurdly long weapons, Locus would have a tough time to say the least if Zodd decided to take him seriously. Grunbeld might be able to put up a better fight thanks to his corundum skin, but if Zodd manages to pierce it, like Guts did, then it's game over for him as well. There's a reason Zodd is Griffith's most trusted general and personal vehicle of choice. It's not just his discretion, it's also his strength. Griffith keeps Zodd by his side because he deems him worthy of being at his side, which also brings us to the only man who has bypassed Zodd's immortality, Griffith himself. In chapter 128, Griffith shows up within Zodd's subconscious in the form of a bright falcon. He can do that kind of thing because he's a God Hand, you see. Zodd is obviously not too pleased with this because he was in the middle of thinking about his best fights, but Griffith draws his attention by promising him what he desires: a fight with the strongest. Zodd knows a challenge when he hears one, and he immediately transforms to try to fight Griffith, but that's when he should have known he messed up. Never in the 375 plus chapters of Berserk have we seen anyone slice through Zodd's head the way Griffith did in this metaphysical dream, and at first Zodd thought it was just that, a dream. But then he felt the blood rushing down his forehead and saw the horn Griffith sliced off in said dream, and he knew that it was all real. And in a brilliant callback to their first fight, it was the same horn that Guts tried to break right before Griffith's arrival. To this day, that horn has never grown back, and the question is, why? Zodd's healing factor should have taken care of that ages ago, but even as recently as the Elfhelm saga, he hasn't regrown the horn Griffith took. Many people think this is out of respect for the God Hand, as Griffith is Zodd's natural superior, but we think there's another explanation, and it probably also explains his supposed immortality. What if the reason Zodd didn't regrow his horn is because he couldn't? We know that apostles are beings that, like Guts, have their feet in both worlds. They operate within the physical world, but they are forged within the astral world, and their hearts are linked directly to the abyss. Until they die, their souls remain torturously entwined within their physical frames. So what if Zodd isn't immortal? It's just that his astral body is so strong that it makes him seem that way. Hear us out on this one. We know that apostles all draw their strength from the abyss, and that their strength is relative based on their desires, right? Base level apostles have baser desires, and so receive base level strength, which is still pretty strong, don't get us wrong, but Guts can kill dozens of them by this point, and we're sure so can Salat, Serpico, Azan, and with a little bit of confidence, Isidro. Not dozens, but you know, enough to get by, but Griffith's generals are definitely in a league of their own when it comes to power, and Zodd is a cut above even them. He can even interpret the flow of causality to an extent, it seems, because he was able to foresee what would happen to Guts and his friends once Griffith decided to claim his power. It's possible that just because he's existed for so long, and out of such a strong desire to find and fight the absolute strongest, that Zodd's astral body is just much stronger than the rest of the apostles. The astral body exists within the subconscious astral realm, and Griffith as a God Hand has immense influence over it. Maybe you need a weapon that can cut through not just the physical body, but the astral body as well, in order to kill Zodd. If that is true, then you already know who the man for the job is, and if you want to know our thoughts on how Guts vs. Zodd will end, check out our video on that, which is up on the channel as well. If it's true that Zodd can only be killed via astral shenanigans, then even beheading might not work. He could just end up hedaning his way out of it. But if we're not correct about this, and you can just straight up kill Zodd, it's gonna take a hell of a lot more than what Guts did on the Hill of Swords, and he did a lot in that fight. To be fair, that was before he got the Berserker armor, and the pair have not had a proper fight since then, so it would be interesting to see whether savaging Zodd to pieces would do the trick. Though a well-placed spatial strike from the Sword of Actuation would as well, so, you know, potato potato. Point is, Zodd is going to be tough to kill, which will be very troublesome for our protagonists, considering he's glued to Griffith at this point in the story. How Guts & Co. will end up unraveling his seemingly immortal anatomy is one of Berserk's biggest mysteries, and we're confident Studio Gaga and Kujimori will give us the answer. Marvelous verdict! But as for this video, we're afraid that's gonna be it. Let us know your thoughts about it in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep on struggling, strugglers.